Listen, you're not gonna find anything on me, okay? Trust me.
Empty your pockets into the tray, sir, or we'll have to. Your pockets, sir?
Lady, the problem isn't in my pants.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes. It's time to talk about all things X-Men, as we like to do here on Sundays on the channel. With me is my good friend, the X-Men historian, the Marvel aficionado, Doc. How you doing, buddy?
I'm pretty good, man. I'm pretty good. I'm happy to be here.
So there were 3 X-Men comics. We got Way of X #4. There was also X-Corp and Excalibur out this week. I'm only reading the X-Men stuff I like anymore, so I read Way of X. Did you read the other 2?
No, I read Way of X, and we'll talk about that. But no, the other 2 books are books that, I mean, you could not pay me to read at this point.
No, smart man. No reason to waste your time and money on stuff that isn't really worth the effort. So we got a pretty damn good debut X-Men comic last week. We get Way of X now that it's out of the Hellfire Gala. A bit of a return to form, not quite as good as the first 2 issues, in my opinion. Still asking a lot of questions, not getting a lot of answers here. What were your thoughts on Way of X #4?
I mostly enjoyed it. I feel like there was some stuff that should have happened in the last issue to set this one up. Like it made a couple of logical jumps that weren't necessary. Even setting up the meeting between Xavier and Legion. But for the most part, I enjoyed it. I mean, it was a little jarring with the jumping back and forth between Krakoa and Mars throughout the book, because I was just like, okay, now they're back on Mars. Okay. So that was a little jarring, but I really did enjoy the overall book.
They're certainly setting up. I find this disappointing, but I'll be honest about this. You know that Nightcrawler is my favorite X-Men character. Probably is my favorite Marvel character, period. One of my favorite comic book characters. It feels like he's starting to take a step back as Legion takes a step forward as a much more complex, interesting character in this story. As you just kind of have Nightcrawler going, and he's seeing all these things happening, but he's not being very decisive, where it feels like Legion sees the problem and he's willing to actually kind of deal with it.
Yeah. That's been happening throughout the entire book ever since Legion got added to this cast. It started out, and I feel like this is a little bit of a swerve on Cy Spurrier's part, where the original solicit for this book implied that Nightcrawler is going to be the one to create a religion, the religion that they're talking about for all the way back to House of X and Powers of X, both in the present and in that X-Men 1,000 year period, that he was going to be the one. I mean, between all the hybrids like Cardinal, and that's a priest of that religion, the Spire, all that stuff. It implied that it was going to be this was going to be a Nightcrawler centric book, but Cy Spurrier has a thing for Legion. He always has. It's going back to whenever he was on X-Men Legacy, and then the other X-Men Legacy book. He made a lot of it about Legion, and that's okay. But I feel like it is definitely setting up with Legion taking the more central role, and I think at the end of this, whenever they do, because they're still blacking out the book of blank in those info pages.
I don't think that means anything anymore. They've been doing that since the very beginning. I don't think we're ever going to get that information redacted. I think that's just used to cause intrigue.
I do think we're going to get it unredacted at some point, and I think it's going to show us that Legion is the one that ends up creating this religion, but that Nightcrawler is his basically cardinal.
No, he's his first pope.
I think you'll end up with, at the end of this, Legion making the serious sacrifice, and essentially dying for Krakoa's sins, some of their original sins, of Xavier's sins, and you'll end up with Nightcrawler as that kind of first pope of the mutant religion. And so that, I feel like that is a little bit of a swerve, but I think in order to set up the likely Legion sacrifice at the end of this, you did need Legion to play a bigger role.
Well, unfortunately, resurrection means nothing. That's heavily hinted at in the pages of this comic book. It's mentioned multiple times. And there are a couple events we got to get to that are kind of jarring, kind of big events. The first one I did not like so much. Fabian Cortez is the biggest scumbag in the history of comic books, right? At least that's what they want you to think. He's brought back Gorgon. I hadn't seen Gorgon since he died, essentially saving Krakoa. He's the hero of Ten of Swords. They bring him back. Apparently, he's a shell of him former self. His mental faculties are aren't all there. And Fabian Cortez is, amplifying the mocking nature of all the people around him into his head, so that he's going to kill all these humans as Nightcrawler sits on. And they have this stupid back and forth about whether or not what Fabian Cortez is doing is actually wrong. It's like there's no moral quandary here.
Yes, there really isn't. I mean,
it's pretty black and white.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, if you're only talking about the law, yes. I mean, I feel like this is Cy Spurrier trying to be smarter than he really is, and arguing law under the guise of arguing morality. He's arguing law, but framing it like it's a morality argument, and when it's not. The law is, yes, from a legal perspective, this is absolutely in a gray area. From a moral perspective, it is absolutely not.
If Cyclops or Wolverine were there, they would have killed him.
Yes, exactly.
And nobody would have had a problem with it because they did the right thing.
Yes. And I understand, like, Nightcrawler could have simply, at any point in time, teleported right behind Gorgon, grabbed him, teleported him literally anywhere else, and problem solved. I mean, it'd be one thing if you're dealing with somebody that isn't a teleporter that can teleport very long distances. I mean, a lot of Nightcrawler's limitations from many back in the 80s and 90s have long since gone away with the limit for his teleportation.
Well, the real problem, Doc, is it's making Nightcrawler look exceptionally weak. Not just weak powered, but weak character.
Yeah.
He did the same thing when we're talking about he's watching people get murdered at the very beginning of this thing. He's not doing anything other than going, Jaw? Oh. It's like, you're one of the original second generation mutants that sparked the Uncanny X-Men. He's a leader of the community here. He's not so weak-willed that he wouldn't act.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I understand that Fabian was trying to put him between a rock and a hard place, but the thing is, Nightcrawler's always been a third way character where he finds a way to do the right thing.
Technically, they try to do this, but he's like, well, let me do a Charlie Chaplin skit.
Yeah.
Make myself look like a moron.
Yeah, just to make everybody happy and laughing, and then Gorgon's...
It was really stupid. There was no tension in the scene, and I thought the payoff sucked. That was absolutely the worst part of this comic, in my opinion.
It really was. I mean, let's forget about the fact that Gorgon... I mean, remember during the contest of swords, they decided, hey, after Rockslide got brought back, we're bringing any of them back. And somehow, apparently, that has changed now.
Yeah.
Without any explanation.
Yeah, I agree. So let's move on to what I thought was the best scene. You hinted at it earlier. There is a sit down between Legion, Charles Xavier. It does not go well.
No. Yeah, like Xavier, like they didn't really set this up. This is something that should have been set up last issue. Like they could have thrown in a panel at any point with Legion confronting his dad and saying, after this is over, we need to have a conversation, or something like that. At least then to set it up for this issue. But so they have this sit down, and the idea is that Legion needs a gateway seed, like one of the gate seeds. And because Xavier even realizes that there's some dark presence on the island that he can't identify. And this is like a weird, like it's kind of a meta commentary on Xavier being aware of even his own, let's just say less than ethical behavior and his own kind of borderline supervillain tendencies in this comic, or well, in the whole post House of X, Powers of X era. And so they get in this kind of back and forth. And I did like the thing with the Zorn brothers kind of standing behind Legion, and Xavier being like, oh, are they there to teach you meditation, to keep yourself in control? And he's like, no, they're here to like literally nuke me if I lose control. And I thought that was the most practical and Legion-like behavior I had seen so far. I'm not sure I like this completely in control Legion. I feel like we need a little bit of, and Xavier even hints at this, basically accusing Legion of not being in control. But the whole point was that Xavier can't know because he is literally the last person that should be confronting whatever this malevolent entity is that we all know as Onslaught, but Xavier has yet to put a name to.
He does now.
Well,
because he decides to tap into Legion's mind. He loses control as Onslaught kind of takes over him, and people are being, they're starting to fight or whatever, and the Zorn brothers essentially incinerate everybody, including Charles Xavier.
Yeah, they basically nuke everyone except for themselves and Legion. To just wipe out. Basically, it'd be like burning out the infection. So now we end this issue essentially with Xavier dead. Now, whether or not this gets actually reflected in any of the other comics, that's my concern.
We're going to talk about that here in a second. Let's wrap this up so we can talk about that.
But so yeah, we have Legion being the one that needs to be the one that confronts Onslaught. It has to be him. It can't be Xavier. Xavier can't even be involved. And he finishes off by kind of hinting at what his plan is going to be by having the Zorn brothers help him essentially plant a gateway seed in his own head. And I feel like this is Legion's plan. He's going to physically force Onslaught through a gate into his own brain because, Legion has 1,000 personalities in there. He can, and obviously he's gotten to the point where he can lock them up because he's the one in control right now. And I feel like that's his plan here. He's going to lock him up with the other 1,000.
And now we shall see. That's the big cliffhanger. Is he puts the seed in his own mind, and you see the thing shoot off, and that's the end of the comic. Now let's talk about the overall problem I'm seeing here. It might not be a problem. It's just something I'm perceiving at this point. We got X-Men #1 last week.
Yep.
And it seems like the X-Men are good citizens now. They're living in Central Park. They're friends with the Avengers. They're friends with the Fantastic Four. They're chummy with everybody, right? We're friends with humans again. Then we get in here to Way of X, and there's this. They're talking when they're saying they're using terms meaning humans that are very derogatory. They're pejoratives, as if there's this huge disconnect between humans and mutants again. Which is it? It feels like these two comics were in two separate universes.
Yeah, you can't figure out whether or not the mutants have gone full racist or if they're back to Xavier's dream. And I don't get, this is a conflicting message. Now, granted, the people doing the "we love mutants" thing are historically good guy mutants, and the guy doing the bad,
Well, Cyclops isn't historically good. In the recent history, he's been, he's kind of mutant.
Yeah. But I mean, throughout most of their existence, whereas Fabian Cortez has always been bad guy mutant, and him being a racist, I mean, especially since if we go far enough back, he was one of Magneto's original acolytes, and they were very much mutant supremacists. They were almost Magneto's X-Men. They were his M-Men, if you would be so kind. That's terrible, and I hate that joke. And okay, that was terrible. And so he's always kind of referred to humans as flat scans, and all the other, Yumi or whatever other, I'm blanking on the other racist terms.
No, I'm just saying, in this book, it still feels like there's an enormous disconnect, and mutants feel superior to humans. But if you read X-Men, the flagship book, you don't get that feeling at all.
Yeah, you really don't. You get this feeling like, oh, we're back to Xavier's dream. We're back to normal House.
Like, are we going to get like half of the X-Men universe doing Jonathan Hickman stuff with Inferno and Wave X and a few other titles, and then half the universe going off where Jerry Duggan's going?
I honestly, I don't have the slightest damn clue. I mean, it is another example of Jerry Duggan not having a goddamn clue what he's writing. But I think we do need a more consistent narrative in this universe between mutants, because the mutants had essentially given up on giving a shit about playing nice with and mixing with humanity. They really had. I mean, that's been the message since the beginning until we got to X-Men 1, where all of a sudden they're back to wanting to play nice with humanity and not just be transactional.
I mean, if you're going to have a shared X-Men lineup, there should be some type of connectivity or overarching theme. They should feel like they're in the same universe, and that's the biggest thing that I noticed this week. I found it jarring. I was like, what is it? Like, what are we supposed to be reading here? Yeah, because now I didn't read the other books, but I'm going to guarantee they've still stuck with the mutant segregationist supremacist vibe that we've had from basically minute one of Hickman X-Men. But Jerry Duggan's X-Men, while it was a good comic, it entirely lost that vibe. And I'm really, it is jarring. None of this feels like there's any editorial oversight. Now this is probably back to, Ukulele Boy being a terrible editor that probably should have been fired 3 years ago. But, look, you need somebody in that office that's going to keep a consistent narrative, a consistent feeling, a consistent vibe, a consistent theme. And we've lost that in 2 weeks. Any semblance of what that being there is long gone. I couldn't agree more. So I enjoy Way of X. I didn't think it was as good as the first 2 issues. I'll give it 3.5, 4 stars. So it's definitely a recommend. Still like the art. I think the comics it's interesting. Legion is definitely stepping out as the standout character in the story in place of Nightcrawler, which I personally find disappointing just because of my affinity for Nightcrawler. And I do dislike the fact that he's He's just there witnessing all these things, but he has no ability to make a decision or act.
Yeah, you need a less passive Nightcrawler in a book that is ostensibly he's the main character of. I mean, I understand that this is kind of a cast book with, Nemesis and Legion and the Zorn brothers and a couple of teen mutants that show that flutter in and out and Nightcrawler, but somebody has to be the lead character within the book. And that was supposed to be Nightcrawler, and it's slowly becoming more and more. I feel like this is starting to suffer a little bit of YA-itis, where if you ever read like the Hunger Games book, basically she's supposed to be super, super important, but she keeps getting knocked out and everything happens around her. And that's, I feel like, a lot of what we're getting here. In a lot of YA books, the main character, everything happens around them, and they end up a little almost, irrelevant to the story until the end. And then they do something, and maybe that's what we're going to get. Maybe we are going to get Nightcrawler kind of having his big heroic moment at the end, but I don't like the fact that they had to basically turn him into a passenger in his own book until we get there.
Yeah, we shall see what happens with the tone of the X-Men line. It feels a little fractured right now, but we shall see. We'll be here next week, talk about X-Men. Also, be looking out for Doc and I tomorrow, because we might be roasting a little Chris Cantwell Iron Man.
Oh, yeah.